Welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. We appreciate you listening in and learning with us. The stories and leadership tips you hear will help you become a great leader. Listen intentionally. Now, to our host, Sean Olson.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast. We are glad to have you here today, and we encourage you to hit that subscribe button right now so you'll see every time a new episode of the podcast comes out. The Intentional Leader Podcast is the podcast where you hear the stories of real people just like you who have become extraordinary leaders. You'll learn some valuable lessons from their lives, lessons you can apply to become the best leader that you were created to be. When you become an intentional leader, lives are changed. I'm your host, Sean Olson. I am a business owner, an executive coach, an author, and speaker, and I'm glad to have you here for this new episode of the podcast. Today, I'm pleased to have my guest, Phebe Trotman, all the way from the wonderful north of Canada out on the West Coast. Phebe is an entrepreneur, and she is an author, and she is an athlete, and she's so much. And so, listeners, you're in for a treat today as you get to hear some of her story and hear how she is still impacting people in powerful ways. Phebe, welcome to the Intentional Leader Podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks so much, Sean. I'm excited. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I just appreciate everything you're doing. So thank you for having me on today.
My pleasure. Thank you. So we met, I don't know, probably about a month ago or so, and had a good conversation about some of your work and your history and what you've been doing. And that's why I felt you'd be a great person to have on our podcast today. And so, Phebe, as you're aware, we start every show with our guests just kind of walking through a little bit of their story so that our listeners can understand who you are. So tell us a little bit about Phebe and some of the leadership lessons learned along the way.
Oh, there's a lot. It's been a journey, Sean, as it obviously is for many people. And so a little bit background of me. So I am an athlete, as you mentioned, an athlete. So I started actually playing soccer when I was 5 years old, very, very young. Mm-hmm. I was the only little girl on an all boys team, also the only person of color on this team as well, too. And that was my introduction to the sport of soccer. And I fell in love with it. I really got started because my older brother played and just continued through. And I've had an incredible career. I'm very grateful for the teams that I've played on, where I've won national championships at all levels, also won a lot of personal accolades as well too. However, it wasn't always like that. You know, I've had challenges along my athletic career, which we can talk about. And then as I transitioned into the business world, or career world, I should say, I was working full time at a computer company and had this plan to create all these side projects. And then once the income from the side projects was high enough, I would transition out. However, it didn't work as planned. My company went bankrupt. I was laid off. Wow. And then that was my intro into the business world. And I've been an entrepreneur now for the last 18 years. And again, learned a lot along that journey as well, too. So I'm excited for our conversation. We can dive into any of those different tracks, if you will.
Yeah, let's start on the soccer front for a little bit. So I know from having talked to you before, you are humble and you don't like to talk about the personal accolades, but obviously you're incredibly accomplished in soccer. And it's not bragging about you because soccer is a team sport, right? And so it's the team that won the national championships and such. But just talk to us a little bit about life lessons and leadership lessons learned in a team sport, because whether we're in sports today or business, everything is done in teams. So what were those lessons you learned about a team sport?
Yeah, it really is. As you said, everything is in a team environment. And one of the things that I love about the beautiful game of soccer, or football for some who call it that, is that everyone's working for a common goal, right? Your ultimate goal is to win the game or win the championship or whatever that may be. And everyone has a different role. And that's one of the things that, you know, as a player, there were times where I was a starter. There was times where I was sitting on the bench. There was times when I didn't even dress for a game, which was very challenging because you're actually watching your team play. Yeah. And in all those different roles and seasons, it's still having that common goal to still win the game. You're still part of the team. And I think that's one of the lessons that is just so important for people to realize, that everyone contributes in different ways and you're meaningful. You still matter, whether you, again, in the game of soccer, whether you're starting and playing 90 minutes or longer if there's overtime, or whether you're getting in for 5 minutes. or you're not, or you're just a training player, how do you make the most of every opportunity that you're given? Really bringing your A game to that opportunity, wherever it is and whatever time, being grateful in what you're given and still contributing to the overall goal of the team. And that's winning the game.
Fantastic. I like that. No matter what the game is, because that game's going to be different for everybody. I know that you are big on the concept of resilience, and we'll talk about your books in a little bit, and that comes out through those books. What was maybe like that one major difficult time in your soccer career where you had to really dig in, find that grit and that resilience for you in the athletic arena?
Yeah, there's been a few of those. I'm going to go back to one of the earliest ones because it really has been such a huge impact, and it was a disappointment, but it led to so many incredible things. And it was when I was 13 years old. I was a young soccer player. I was playing on my community team and did very well in the community environment. And some friends were like, teammates were like, why don't we try out for this other team, a provincial team? And I was like, sure. I didn't know much about it, but I went out for it and ended up not making that team. So I want the listeners to picture this. You're in, a group environment and the coach lists off all the players making it to the next round. He didn't say my name. I fully expected him to say my name. So I just kind of waited. I was like, oh, I'm sure he made a mistake. And it wasn't. And then he said, everyone whose name I didn't call can be released. And, it was a tough moment. I walked to the car. I saw my dad. And when I saw my dad, I just burst into tears and I cried for a few weeks, if you will.
Wow.
It was just so gut-wrenching because I fully expected to make it and I didn't. And I remember my parents finally kind of, I think, having enough of me just crying. And they sat me down, had a very tough love conversation. And they asked me two important questions. They asked me, number one, what do I want to do with my soccer career? In terms of what next, right?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, it was like, well, are you going to let one coach's decision determine your path in this sport?
Wow.
And they had that conversation in a sense where it was like, the decision's done. There's nothing we can do to change this coach's decision, but what you do next going forward will change it will lay the foundation for your career. And they really put it back on me to focus on what I could control, which was, my attitude, how hard I worked, all the things I did behind the scenes so that I perform when I'm on the field. And really that shifted my whole focus because that's when I realized I wanted to be an impact player. It didn't matter what team I was on. I wanted to be an impact player. I also knew that whatever I did behind the scenes in terms of off field, if you will, would contribute to my success on the field. And so I had to do that work on my own, oftentimes with the ball in my backyard or with my brother or my dad. And so that's really transferred into all areas of my life where I've just, I had this focus. It shifted where it was like whatever team I'm on. And when I say team, as we talked about earlier, team, not necessarily in just the sense of soccer, but whatever team I'm on, whether it is other soccer teams, whether it's other sports, whether it's a career, a business, I want to be an impact person and leave my mark on that.
I love that. And you are so blessed to have parents that cared enough to take that time. And instead of coddle you, they kind of challenged you. I mean, they challenged you there, but they're more like, you've got a choice here. And so they were leaving it in your hands. And so you're blessed to have had that opportunity with that.
I'm so grateful.
Yeah. So you push forward as an impact player. I know from our previous conversation, you were a striker. So you're out there working to score the goals and some national championships. Just briefly fill in our audience. Like, where were you playing? What were those championships?
Yeah. So as I said, extremely grateful for phenomenal coaches and exceptional teammates. And so I've had the privilege and honor to win at an under 19 national championship. I went on to play at Simon Fraser University and we won the NAIA championship. And actually what then was the longest game in history. It actually ended up being equivalent of almost 2 soccer games because back then you played golden goal. So it was tied after, regulation. So you go to overtime and then overtime and then overtime and overtime until a goal is scored. So we won that in my final year, which was just amazing. And then I've won on the adult premier level in terms of a national championship, as well as with the Whitecaps women's team in the W League. We won a national championship there. And I still play and have been fortunate to win 2 Masters national championships as well.
My goodness. And these are all, for our listeners in the U.S., you're understanding, like, what are these leagues? I've never heard of them. These are all Canadian leagues, right?
Some of them, yes and no. The NAIA, it was in US and Canada,
Yep.
and then as well as the W League was a Canadian and US league as well too. So
Fantastic.
some only in Canada, some in both. So again, just super fortunate in just the career that I've been able to have.
Yeah, and what I love about soccer, I played it in college a little bit too, nowhere near at your level of skill. What I love about it is it really is three teams at once, right? You've got the forwards who are out there who are trying to score the goals, the midfielder trying to control the game, the midfielders, but you've got to have the stout defense and the great keeper. And all three have to be on point or you are not a champion.
Absolutely. Absolutely spot on. And when I think back to especially that NAIA game when it was Golden Goal, I mean, you're continuing to play and it really takes such a huge team effort. I mean, our back line was exceptional. Our keeper made an amazing save in the overtime period. So it really is such a team sport where everyone has to work together to bring their best to perform to win a championship.
Mm-hmm. So crazy question has nothing to do with leadership and stuff, but so the golden goal is where you play overtime after overtime till somebody scores. That's why it's the golden goal. Today, it's typically 2 overtime periods. If there's nothing, it goes to PKs. Are you glad you had the golden goal era, or do you wish you had the PK era?
I've done both, and actually
Yeah.
I've won championships in both. Where the one thing about the golden goal is you are just it's about grit, it's about endurance,
Mm-hmm.
it is about mental toughness. Like you just continue to keep playing, and so from a physical fitness standpoint, the golden goal. There's what I love about that is it really takes all the training you've ever done and brings it into that moment, with if you will. Whereas, and again, the whole team's involved in that experience. Golden or a PK situation, depending how many PKs you have to go through, it might just be select players who are doing that. I mean, everyone's still involved because you need your teammates' support and your coach's
Yeah.
support, if you will. So, I sort of love the golden goal. I
Yeah.
really do. Yeah, as tough as it was and the length of time, it really is a true test of just your endurance and again that mental toughness to be able to keep playing.
Yep. I feel the same way. The penalty kicks are great, but it's like, you know, it's which keeper guesses better. And so you take, at that point, you're talking, 90 minutes of game time plus typically like 30 minutes of OT. So you've got all this time in the game, and then it comes down to chance to a point with PKs. You got
Good
to be
point. Yeah, a little bit of skill too, because again, you
yeah.
have to have. Are you a PK taker? Did you ever take PKs when you were
No,
playing?
I played sweeper. I was a defender. I never took those things. No.
Okay, I was going to say because I mean it is goalies for sure, but it's also those players having that composure,
Absolutely.
the focus to handle it under
Yep.
pressure. So it is, yeah. Both
There's
of
a
them
ton of
are.
skill in the strikers and the ones kicking for sure, and in the keepers. I guess for me, it's what you were saying. It's 150 minutes of team, and then it comes down to individuals. Let's keep it
Little
as a
bit.
team. Yeah, I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have had athletic careers, but then, we get older. So athletics pass to the wayside. They become recreational, not competitive, and things like that. How did you translate what you learned about leadership and team in the athletic arena into your corporate arena?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I was fortunate when I was working full time at a computer company, it really was. I started, as I said, a bunch of side projects. So I was feeling kind of uninspired. And one of the things I love to be, I guess this is the athletic side, I love to be challenged. I love to set goals. And so when the company went bankrupt and I was laid off, I sort of had this, crossroads moment in terms of what next. And I had been using this tool to help me with one of my businesses. And the tool offered a compensation network marketing component structure. So I chose to build that business. And,
Wow.
it's interesting because in the beginning, I did not apply a lot of the principles and things that I learned. Like, for
Mm,
one example, is I kind of, as an entrepreneur, this was my thought in the beginning, was like, well, I can work when I want to work, which is true. As an entrepreneur, you can do that. However, I wasn't consistent. Like I would work one day and then I'd be like, I'm going to take a couple days off. And I wasn't having consistent results. And this is just so important for people to realize, like, if you want consistent results, you have to put in consistent activity. And
absolutely.
when I kind of put on that, okay, what did I do as an athlete? Well, consistently train. and be coachable. And when I applied that to my network marketing business, then I started to have results. And in terms of like some of the lessons, the team part was so much fun for me, because as you're building a network marketing business, you're working with other people to help them accomplish their goals. And you have kind of an overall goal for the team. And so we had a lot of fun and just really listening to people and making sure everyone feels valued. That's one thing that I realized, especially my last year of university playing, how important it was, to get everyone on the same page in terms of making sure people feel appreciated and valued regardless of what their playing time is. And it was the same thing in terms of building a business, is letting people know, regardless of whether you're in this business just for the social aspect or the growth aspect, the personal growth, or you want to make a part-time income or full-time, you have a place here. And really valuing people and letting them know we appreciate you for where you're at and what you bring to the table. And I think that's just so important as leaders in all areas, is really recognizing people and appreciating them for what they bring to the table, because everyone's unique. That's what makes it a
Absolutely.
beautiful in terms of a sport as well as careers and businesses, is what people bring, their uniqueness and their
Yeah.
skill set that they bring to the table, and how can you appreciate that and help them rise up in that as well too.
Incredibly well said. And I think where leaders mess up with this, I'll try to use soccer as kind of like a picture of this. Keepers' names are typically known, right? Because if they're a good keeper, they're making all these saves. So the name of the keeper. That main striker, you'll know their name, and you might know who that all-star midfielder is or something like that. But what I like about what you're saying there is, when we know and appreciate what everybody brings to the table, no matter what it is, and no matter how valuable it is, right? Because this is the problem: is leaders, oftentimes we think, well, these two are my most valuable players because they're doing this better than anybody else, and they almost minimize everybody else. But no, the skills that they bring are still essential to the team. And so I love the way you were talking about that, where as a leader, it's our responsibility to realize everybody is bringing something to the table. How do we as the leader maximize that for the team, not minimize who they are if they're not as good as somebody else?
Absolutely. And part of it too, like even when, for example, I talked about how in my career I've had different roles. And even when I wasn't necessarily the starter on the team, you still have a role to bring your best, because you're now helping the players who are starting, you're helping them get better. Right. And it's the same thing as you just shared. Like, how can we, you might have your two valuable players, your two top all stars. However, everybody else is either helping them as well. It's going to help to push them forward, because you're, in the soccer world, if you will, you're competing for that position. You're competing for that starting position. So
Mhm.
even if you don't get it, you've just helped that player become better. And if you can focus on the overall goal of whatever it is as a group, collectively, you're looking to accomplish, and realizing that everybody plays a role in that success, and really letting them know, because it can happen where players, if we're using the soccer, can feel not as valued. And then that still is going to impact the overall attitude and collective morale, if you will, of the
Mhm.
whole team, when you have players who aren't feeling, that they're appreciated for what they're bringing. And so in the business world, that's equally important, to make sure people know that they are valued, because you want to keep that morale up in
Right.
terms of to hit your goals.
Absolutely. Well stated. Well stated. So, soccer, then the corporate job or the company job, and now entrepreneur. Tell us what Phoebe's doing today from the entrepreneurial side.
Yeah, so it's been a fun journey, and as I said, like, the journey just continues. And one of the things, I've always been very open, and I've had it on my heart for the last 5 to 7 years. I wanted to create something to help and encourage and inspire, to kind of take all the
Nice.
lessons that I've learned as an athlete as well as entrepreneur, and share it in a way. And I wasn't really sure what that would look like, and I was very open, and I was sharing it with some friends, dear friends, and they were the ones who actually suggested that I write a book.
Hmm.
And initially I was kind of like, a book, I don't know, and one of the things, and it's so important, again, who we surround ourselves with, because
Yeah.
what they did for me is they flipped it a little bit, and they shared, well, writing a book isn't just about me, it's really for the people that it can help. And it was when they said it in that way that I was like, good point. Okay. I was open to it. And the month before this conversation, I had an incredible honor. I was inducted into the Coquitlam Sports Hall of Fame, and we had an
Wow.
induction ceremony. And in that, we were talking about what his sport had given me, and shared some of the life lessons that we've talked about today. And I shared, though, that the only reason I've had these highs are because of the lows, the tough stuff, sitting on the bench or not dressing or not making a team and coming back from injuries and all sorts of disappointments, pushing through them to get to the other side. And that's when I realized that that's what I wanted to write a book about, to share the story behind the story. And most importantly, what did someone do to work through that disappointment to get to the other side? Was there something that they did or didn't do, and how that we can share that with other people? Because even if the situation isn't the same, the lesson or what someone did to work through is applicable to everybody's story and journeys.
Absolutely. I appreciate that you took those life lessons and brought it forward. And so you're strong on resilience. It comes across in the name of the book and what you're doing, and that is never quit on a bad day. Love the title. How did you get there? Has that been a mantra for you? Has somebody said that to you? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, so I heard that saying many, many years ago, and it always stuck with me. It stuck with me in sports. It stuck with me in career. It stuck with me in business, if you will. And so it's funny because when I was, open to the idea and I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to write a book that's the story behind the story. And then that saying popped in my head, and I was like, yes, that'd be a great name for a book and for a mission, and really to get it out there. And so I always say I do this thing with God. I call it my open the door, close the door, because I still was a little bit unsure. And just like everyone, I had the chatter of Phebe, really a book,
Right.
And so I said, okay, God, open the door. If the URL neverquitonabadday.com is available, then I know it. You're saying go forward. If it's not, well, I started it. Okay. Not this name or something else. And to my surprise, and I'm so grateful, I came home and put it in and it was available. And, so I purchased it right away. And then I had that instant of oh, am I doing this? Okay, I'm doing this, and I got super excited about it. And so, never quit on a bad day. My goal with it is really for people, because it sticks in your mind. And so whether or not you ever read the book, the fact that you've heard this saying now, that you can apply it to your own life when you're going through tough times, how do you push through that to get to the other side? Because that's really where the growth is we grow through our challenges. That's where confidence comes from, when you push through tough stuff and get to the other side. And so never quit on a bad day is never quitting on a bad day, but also never quitting on your dreams and goals, never quitting on the person that you're destined to be, never quitting on the belief that you can create the life that you are designed and destined to have.
Wow, that's fantastic. I know that the first one you wrote was a collection of athletes, correct? Athletes came together?
The second one. The first one was a collection of stories, of thriving entrepreneurs, and then the second one.
Okay, sorry, I had that backwards. So the first one was Thriving Entrepreneurs. And so basically it's their stories of running into difficult situations, being resilient, persevering, lessons learned. Is that right?
Correct.
So we're learning from them. So give our audience a taste of this. Just take one of those contributors, tell his or her story, some of the life lessons that come out of that, so we get a taste of what the book will do for us.
Absolutely. So with the way the book's set up, just for the listeners, so it is a collection of short stories. At the end of every story, there's a section called Reflections on Resilience. And that's where I write kind of a summary, if you will, a lesson that you can pull out of the story for the listeners, or the readers, I should say, to kind of reflect on their own journey. Because I truly believe we're all extremely resilient. We're still here. We've all been through some stuff. So the book's designed to help you kind of remember, if you will, how resilient you are, and to take some tools that you can apply to your own lesson to move forward. So actually, funny enough, one of the, someone just messaged me this morning actually and shared how chapter 7 has just moved them. It's called Thankfulness During Tough Times. And it's with a couple, Dave and Roxanne Obiso, and they were going through a very, very challenging time. I won't share all of it. You can, read their story, if you will. But the biggest takeaway is how they were thankful in that tough time. And one of the things that I love that they did, and I share this in the Reflections on Resilience, is they videotaped their tough day. So they were going through this tough time. They videotaped it, recorded, I should say, videotape, going back to old school. So they recorded it because that was their line in the sand moment, where they were like, we're not going to ever be not prepared for, when life hits in different ways. And they still had thankfulness. They still had their hope and faith for better times ahead. And in the book, I have QR codes so you can actually scan it and you can see that video. And then it also at the end of every chapter, there's everyone, all the contributors share a video of encouragement, and you can see their video of encouragement now and just the growth that they've had. And so I encourage people to do that. And that whole lesson is all about gratitude. How do you find gratitude even when you're in the challenging times? And so it's a powerful chapter because you see their low time, you hear their low time, you see what they did to move through it, and how they were able to grow and come out on the other side. So that's one of the lessons in there, is really a big one about gratitude.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I like that they did that video to capture their moment of turning, right? Because there's always that choice, right? Am I going to quit or am I going to push? And the fact that they made that available to your readers and then the follow-on story, that is fantastic. So the first one is entrepreneurs. We have a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs that listen to this podcast. So I'm sure that will touch them, and they're going to be able to see themselves in some of those stories. Your second one, which you just finished recently, if I recall right, is athletes. And so I know it's going to sound weird, but it's like, so with athletes, I can see not making the team. I can see injuries. Are they pulling their life into it? What's the second one like?
Absolutely. And one of the things that's so beautiful about both books is the stories are very different. I really put it to each person to just share, like, what is one of your never quit on a bad day moments, whatever it might be, right? So it really isn't, the books aren't designed to be like, okay, thriving entrepreneurs is only for entrepreneurs and accomplished athletes is only for athletes. It's really for anyone who has goals and dreams and has ever felt kind of bumped off those, or maybe you're on a high and you want to continue on that high. So accomplished athletes, I mean, the stories, they range. Yes, there's the stories of, not making a team that comes through and how people push through. There's stories that are totally have nothing to do with sports in terms of, again, I don't want to share too much because it's one of those where when you read it, you really get the gist of it. But the biggest takeaway for everyone is that the books are really short stories. You can read a chapter a day if you want to. A lot of people sit and end up powering through. And there are lessons, and you'll be inspired by all the stories in different ways, depending on where you are at in your journey.
Awesome. So what is your vision? What's next? So you could keep doing these collections of stories. And I actually want to ask you some questions about that in a minute, but are you developing content out of this and doing speaking? What's your dream with this concept?
Yeah, so I have been doing speaking. I actually just did an event last night, which was phenomenal. So continuing to do speaking, some workshops, working with some teams as well too, to help them with kind of their never quit on a bad day and how to push through that and create that positive team culture. So I'm very open. I'm excited to see where this continues to go. Right now it is, focusing on the books, getting the message out there, and just seeing how I can be of service and help other people to push through those tough times, and really to just equip them for, what might happen next, and how I can just inspire them and encourage and be a support to them as well.
Good. I like the concept of the book. I know there's a lot of other books that are coming out now that are, I'll just call them collaboratives, right? Where you have multiple authors essentially and someone who's bringing it all together. How did you find these individuals that gave the stories in your collection?
Yeah, so a lot of them I have great relationships with, and they've been just inspired. They've inspired me along my journey. And so right away, when I first decided the concept of the book, I started making a list, and essentially it was going to be one book to start, really. And then as I was writing down names of people who have impacted me and who I just know have incredible servant hearts, if you will, and have stories to share and lessons, I realized it's more than just one book. And so that's where the book series came from. And so in the first book, every person, I believe, except for one, I had a relationship with before. And then one of the couples I reached out to through a referral through someone else. In terms of on the athlete side, again, personal relationships, teammates, mentors, or friends of friends who I reached out to, and they were just gracious enough to say yes to share their story, because it is really an incredible lineup of athletes in the Accomplished Athletes book. I mean, there's two-time NBA champion, there's a two-time Super Bowl champion, there's world record holder. It's an incredible lineup of athletes. And the reason I wanted to do a collection of stories for the vision of it is because everybody has a different journey, and one of my stories may not connect with someone else, but there's another person's story that will. And I just really feel like it's important for people to hear from different people, because at different points along everyone's journey, something will connect with them. And so I wanted to create something that everybody could benefit from.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. So, ideas of next ones, any particular, is there going to be a third and a fourth in particular areas?
There is. So when I first it was like, okay, book series, and I had the kind of vision for 4 books. So
Mhm.
I do have a plan in place for the third one and the fourth one. So looking forward to that. That'll most likely be next year, if you will, for the third. We'll
Yeah.
see. We'll see how the year goes. But yeah, just excited to continue to help and encourage. That really is a goal of mine and something that I believe is part of who I am. Is really to just inspire and encourage people and support them and let them know, I love what you shared about in the beginning, that we're all, we're all individual people. It's just our choices that we make next that can allow us to help other people. And I believe there's such a ripple effect when one person steps out and, follows their passion and their
Mhm.
journey. It inspires other people to do the same. And so that's really what I want to continue to help people with.
Fantastic. Yeah, the heartbeat of what you're doing in the book is the heartbeat of why we're doing this podcast, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just there's people that can identify with Phoebe. Like, I get her. I've been there. I've done that. And it's going to drive them. Our other guests, it's going to impact other people differently. And so, with you having that collection of stories, it's that same thing. Hey, if it's 10 chapters, two of them, all 10 you can learn from, but two of them are probably going to smack you across the face. Like, that's me. I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've got some inspiration knowing that I can get there too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's
Good.
why I love what you're doing with the podcast, right? It's inspiring people. It creates that catalyst for someone to move forward, and then the impact continues from there.
Absolutely. Well, Phoebe, this is fantastic. Listeners, you'll find in the show notes all the links to go purchase those 2 books. She gave us some good teasers there. I love there's videos attached to it. Phoebe, we finish every single episode with the same question. So I'm going to ask you that question. We like nice, practical, intentional tips here. That's why it's the Intentional Leader podcast. So, what is something our listeners can do intentionally today to be a better leader?
Well, leadership, I'm going to say the L in leadership is for listening. So active
Mhm.
listening. So this week, I encourage people just really to listen with empathy, listen with compassion, listen to understand, and then move forward from there.
Great tip that we need to hear on a regular basis. Phoebe, anything you want to share with our audience as you make your way out today?
I just want to say a huge thank you to you, Sean, for having me on this podcast. Again, as I said, I love what you're doing, so I appreciate you and all that you are doing. I should also mention for the listeners, you can get a free chapter from the first book available on
Nice.
the website, and it's the full chapter. It's all about belief. It's a powerful story and one that I think every person needs to read, so that's why that one's available for free. So I encourage people to go to neverquitonabadday.com and get that free chapter.
Is that chapter yours?
It actually isn't mine. It
Okay.
is a chapter. Yeah, no, it's a chapter. When I read through all of them, this was one that just can help everybody because it also talks about success language and the things that we're saying to
Mm.
ourselves as well as others and how it can set us up for success.
Well, thanks for your generosity in that and making that available to everybody. Phoebe, it's been great to have you. Look forward to developing this relationship as time passes. Thanks for being a guest on the Intentional Leader podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast presented by Reenergize Professional Coaching. Be sure to see the show notes for links to Reenergize Professional Coaching and links to contact our guests. Now, hit that subscribe button so that you are alerted with every new episode of the Intentional Leader Podcast.